Just last week, an advisory committee to the FDA in the US, in America, voted 9-1 against approving MDMA as trauma therapy for PTSD for war veterans in the US after Rick Doblin and MAPS had worked 25 years to do the phase 3 clinical trials to get this through. And it wasn't even the FDA, it was some advisory body that advised the FDA, and they voted 9-1 against.
Yes.
And, you've got something that's safe and effective, and it's not being used. And you've got one veteran every hour in the US committing suicide.
Yes.
This is an appalling decision.
Beyond appalling, and when you mention these names, what comes up for me, it's again, in the early 2000s, I started doing psychedelic research. I was coming from India, typical stories of, but the traumatized brain, similar style upbringing like yours, and emotionally detached, dissociative, removed, not even being sure. But my psychedelic journeys have proven to me that there's a lot to it, that there's some powerful therapeutic aspects there. And so I started doing that research, and Rick Doblin from MAPS, back then it was the early days, he supported my study, and we met, and it all looked so promising until I arrived to the place of trying to pass ethics committees. And I remember the level of resistance, especially early 2000s in Australia. It felt very conservative. Nobody wanted to hear about it. And it was very disheartening to pursue this research. And indeed, I left it, which is why I'm coming back to it. The FDA, what they did a couple of weeks ago, is the same old stuff that we keep seeing all the time. And I'll give you an example. They challenged the research methodologies.
Yes.
They're saying, well, double-blind placebo is no longer kept, because once you give someone a psychedelic and you have a control group that did not receive a psychedelic, it is pretty damn obvious who got it and who didn't. And so we are unable to keep the double-blind placebo. And instead of challenging the paradigm itself and the research methodology itself, we're just chucking all the baby with the water and saying, I don't think we can do sound research over here. And I think that's absolute rubbish.
Yeah,
we have to find a way to do that kind of research instead of trying that research to meet our old methodologies.
I think we're further along in Australia because I think the first patients have been treated for trauma with MDMA in a clinic down in Melbourne. I think it's early days, but I think in some regards we've now got authorised psychiatrists who can prescribe MDMA for PTSD. So in some ways we're a bit further along than the US.
It is quite the surprise that Australia jumped the gun and legalized particular treatments, mainly MDMA for PTSD, for trauma, and psilocybin for grief.
Yeah.
This is the umbrella kind of definition for now, and all eyes are on to us now, especially after the FDA has, blocked it again. It looked like it was already in.
Yes.
And so much work, indeed. 2.5, 3 decades by Rick. He did so much work there. So there's now research projects, apart from the private therapies, research projects across Australia in numbers coming out. We have the wonderful team from Queensland University of Technology, heading it, I think, Vanessa Beasley, and they already doing dosing with grief, people, family members who are experiencing prolonged grief, losing a family member to cancer. And so they're dosing with psilocybin. So it's exciting. It's really a surprise that Australia is leading the way now, and I think it will create wonderful things, but also lots of pressure that all eyes are on to us now to produce good research, which is another thing. We had no research here. We relied on research from other parts of the world.
I think there's other factors at play because statistically MDMA at a therapeutic dose level is safer than a glass of wine or riding a horse. And I think Rick Doblin was getting efficacy rates of something like 78 to 80% effective in treating PTSD in war veterans after 2 or 3 sessions. And very rare to get those levels of efficacy from any treatment. So for that to be shut down based on the research methodology, I mean, there's got to be other things going on.